All right, guys, we're going to get started. Um, so, we're going to look at how basically this notion of laissez-faire or laissez-faire, how this type of government led to the rise of what's known as the captains of industry. We're going to look at the captains of industry. We're going to look at what a monopoly is today. We're going to look at how this kind of hands-off approach that the United States government takes in terms of the economy at the time has some, benefits for sure, but we're going to look at, how it could lead to, kind of some problems as well. So again, I just threw the vocab on there just so you kind of have it in front of you. Again, laissez-faire is a hands-off type government where they choose not to interfere or get involved with workers in the free market. Okay, so we're going to really look at what that means, okay, and not getting involved in the economy. But looking at this focus question, all right, you're going to see how this type of government leads to some things that wouldn't happen if there was some more government control. So I'll give you a minute to copy down this next slide. I know we've gone over capitalism before back in Unit 2. We're going to go over it again. I think it's important to keep writing this down because it is our economic system and we need to have a good understanding of it. So please copy this down. You don't need to rewrite the next focus question. Just please copy down the two things in red here. All right, I'll give you a minute to do it. All right, so again, this is a review, but our economy is called free enterprise capitalism. All right, and we need to just kind of re-go over some things about what our capitalist system is and how our country makes money before we move on to today's lesson fully. All right, so I'm going to just go over the definition again. So capitalism is an economic system where individual citizens are responsible for trade and industry, and the individual who does the trade and industry receives all of the profit and money minus the taxes that go to the government. All right. So each individual person in the country, when you get older, you're responsible for making money for yourself. There's not really too many opportunities. There are some, but usually you're not provided money by the government for the most part. Right? There are some programs in place that if something happens, you're unemployed. If there's an issue like a pandemic, the government can get involved a little bit to try and help you out. But ultimately, you are responsible for making your own money. You're responsible for making money for your family. All right, and this is how our economic system works. All right, and the way you make money is you have to provide a service or a job or a product for someone to benefit off of. All right, so I am providing a service. I am in the service industry as a teacher. I'm providing a service to the public in terms of education. Therefore, for my service, I get paid for that. Okay, you could do hundreds of thousands of other jobs. Okay, but ultimately, you're trying to get a job to make money for yourself. Okay, once you get that money, however you get that money, no matter what the job is, you are then open to do whatever you want for that money. This seems very straightforward. It seems probably very obvious, but trust me, there are countries where that's not how it works. We'll learn more about these countries a little more when we get to Unit 5, but you'll notice that there are certain countries that when you do a job and you work, you don't get paid money. All the money that you work goes to the government, and then the government will provide you with certain things. All right, so when you get a paycheck, you decide what to do with that money. Okay, that profit is yours, and everything is trying to make as much money for yourself. Not everything, but a big goal in life is to try and make as much money for yourself, so you have a good and easier life based on the amount of money you have. All right. So we're going to talk about the 5 components of capitalism today, and I actually don't have you write this down, but I think you should listen very carefully because this isn't something that can come up on the Regents. But I think it's very important to know what makes our country a capitalist country. Okay. Now, is capitalism a perfect system? No. But I got to just tell you my bias with this. I think capitalism is an excellent economic system when it really comes down to it, because people ultimately, okay, if they're trying to make money for themselves, ultimately start helping out the rest of the country. And I'll explain what I mean. All right. So there are 5 components of capitalism. The first thing is economic freedom. And we've kind of already talked about this. You get to decide what you want to do with your money. You get to decide what job you want to have. There are countries where you don't get to choose what job that you have. All right, North Korea is a good example. Communist China is a good example. Back in history, the Soviet Union is a good example, or Italy is a good example. You don't really get to choose what job you have. All right, so think about that. You could be a very talented artist, right? And then they might make you a factory worker. You may be very good working with your hands, and they say, you know what, we need you to be, a doctor, and maybe you're not that educated. All right, so you get to choose what job you want to have. You get to choose, what to do with your money. All right, now one of the big problems, I guess, with economic freedom is if you are a person who struggles, or maybe a person who's a little bit lazy and decides not to get a job, that's going to be harder for you to make some money. All right, so having freedom is good, but you have to have the initiative to kind of go out and get it. The second component is not something is known as voluntary or a willing exchange. When you decide to buy something, that's usually your choice. No one can really force you to buy anything. Our country is built on, obviously, freedom. People choose what they want to buy. Okay, last night we ordered pizza for dinner. Okay, didn't spend that much money. Got a normal large pie, half pepperoni, half plain. That's what we decided to buy. We spent the money. That was our choice for what we wanted to buy. There are times where we want to go for a nice steak dinner. Okay, it is our choice what we want to do with our money. And what we're going to do is we're going to give our money for a particular service or for a particular product, and in exchange we get that product. All right. Some people, I'll use sneakers a lot in this lesson. Some people, want to buy very expensive sneakers, $300, $400 sneakers. That will never be me. I'm going to spend $30, $40, $50 tops on sneakers. All right, but some people, the sneakerheads, want to buy more, better sneakers. That is completely up to them. Okay, and when you do that, you make a voluntary, willing exchange. You give them money, and in exchange, they give you the product for the price that you paid for. All right, that's another good example. Okay, in other countries, believe it or not, you do not have choice sometimes on what shoes you have, on what sneakers you have, on what food that you get. You are provided things by the government. Because remember, you don't have a voluntary, willing exchange. You are provided just, this is it. You don't have choice. You go to a store, you could buy whatever clothes you want. You don't have choice in some countries. In this country, you do. Third thing, you have private property rights, okay? I'm not going to ask you guys if you live in a house, but if you live in a house, you own that property. If you rent, you own that property space as long as you pay. All right, so you are allowed to own your own property. There are certain countries where the government owns all of the houses and all of the properties, and they get to decide and build it on how to look. All right, once you get your house, you can make it look any way you want. If you want to put a circus tent on top of it, you can. Okay, it's your house. You can do what to do. All right, that's the third thing. The fourth thing is known as the profit motive. Everyone here is, in our country, trying to make more and more money. And the idea is if people are trying to make more and more money for themselves, they're going to create better services and better products so they make more and more money. And this is kind of an endless cycle of, trying to, trying to make as much money for themselves as possible, in turn helps out the country's economy and helps out everyone else and makes the country richer. Now, this is a little bit of a controversial statement. Well, some people say if people are greedy, okay, or people are trying to make as much money as possible for themselves, then they're being selfish because they're not, helping on other people. The counteract to that, the opposite viewpoint is, well, if I'm trying to make as much money for myself, okay, I'm also helping out, a lot of people in the long run. So let's say as a teacher, I'll give you 2 examples. As a teacher, I want to make as much money for myself. Okay, for me to make more money, I need to do a good job at my job. Okay, so I get raises. I also need to be educated and stay on top of things and go to school. This is going to increase the amount of money I have. And the reason I do that is I want to make more money for myself and my family. And therefore, I become a better teacher for you guys because I wanted that, and now I've gotten more education. Another good example is if you're making a product, let's say the iPhone. Okay, the reason why the iPhone is a good product, or the Android is a good product, is those owners, okay, those people working at those jobs are trying to make more money for themselves. So they want to make the best possible product possible, because the more they sell, the more money they make. All right. And then the last example is competition. And this is going to lead perfectly into our lesson today, which is dealing with monopolies. Okay, competition means there are multiple different people or companies selling the same product. And what that means is you're going to get the best possible product when you buy something. Okay, because if a lot of people are selling the same product, those companies are going to try and make the best possible product, so you buy it from them and not their competitors. All right, and we're going to talk about this when we get to our part here. So now that we have a little bit of an introduction and review, hopefully have a little bit of a better understanding with capitalism, okay, the whole idea is basically trying to understand the next slide. Now, when you guys are kids, so the example I always like to do, and I'll do this a lot over the next couple of months, is instead of thinking money, because maybe a lot of you guys don't have jobs at this point, and that's completely fine. Maybe some of you do, okay, but a lot of you don't. Think of it in grades, okay? Your goal is to try and get the best possible grade possible, because the better grades you get, the more opportunities it opens up for you. Some of you guys are very motivated. Obviously, you're in Regents class. Some of you guys are very motivated to try and get the best possible grade, because that can get you into a better high school, and then eventually that can get you into a better college, and that can get you into a better job, okay? Some of you are motivated to maybe just make your parents happy. Whatever the reason is, you are trying to get the best possible grade possible, okay, for yourself. All right, hold on. I have hold on one second. Just copy this down here in red. My doorbell's ringing, so I have to get that. And then I'll be back in a second. That's what you call working from home problems. I also think you should definitely write down the definition. Okay, definitely write down the definition. All right, I'll give you 30 more seconds. Okay, so let's take a look at the word captains of industry. So basically, our lesson today is looking at what's known as the monopoly owners, or the captains of industry at this time. And the captain, if you're the captain of something, obviously you're the leader, but the captains of industry are obviously the leaders of industry throughout this time. So these are the leaders making, some of the biggest products, owning the biggest factories, just really helping out our country's economy, because they are basically creating jobs and products that are very efficient and helpful for America. Now you're going to learn these people, some of these people here, are some of the richest human beings in American history. Okay, if you take the money they made at the time and you inflate it for the money of this time, they will be richer than any other human being in American history. So we're going to look at why they became the most successful in terms of money and the most wealthy businessmen of all time. Okay, a captain of industry was known as a monopoly owner. In other words, they owned the production and sale of one product. They owned all of it. Okay, so when you own a monopoly, you own the exclusive possession or of control of a commodity, a product, or service. The exclusive possession of or control of a commodity or service. You are the only one that sells a product. You're the only one that creates a product. Okay? So let's take a look at the example of sneakers again. In the chat, I would, usually give you an opportunity. What different types of sneaker companies are there? I like to use sneakers because I think, there's a lot of kids that are into sneakers. Even if you're not into sneakers, you should know a lot of sneaker companies. So in the chat, start listing off some sneaker companies that you're familiar with. I'll start with one. I'll start with the big. I'll start with a not so big one. I'll start with Skechers. You tell me, what are some other sneaker companies that you guys are familiar with? Go to your, if you want to go to your, I'm looking at my sneaker rack right now. Nike, excellent. That's a big one. What's another one? Adidas, excellent. Give me one more. One more sneaker company. Air Force, perfect. Beautiful. Okay? And then you have Under Armour. Okay, you have Fila. You have all these different types of sneakers. Okay, you have all these different types of sneaker companies. When you go to buy a pair of sneakers, you have choice on what you want to buy. But back in history, okay, there used to be people that owned monopolies on a product. So picture Nike was the only company that made sneakers. That means they would own a monopoly. So you couldn't go buy Adidas sneakers, you couldn't go buy Air Force sneakers, you couldn't buy Under Armour sneakers, you couldn't buy Skechers. If you wanted to buy sneakers, you had to go to buy them from Nike. When someone controls the production of an entire product, they own a monopoly. Okay, so let's talk about why this is good and why this is bad. Owning a monopoly means that there is no competition on the product. That means no one else is trying to sell the product. So let's talk about how this can be good. Well, if you are a monopoly owner, that is excellent. Because if you're the only one selling that product, that means people, they need to buy something, they need to buy that product, they need to go and buy it from you. Okay? And that means you're going to make a ton of money. So if you are a captain of industry or if you are a monopoly owner, like you're going to notice some of the people were, they made a ton of money. Ton of money. All right? Because they're the only ones selling the product. People didn't really have, in a true capitalist system, people didn't really have choice. They didn't have economic freedom and they really didn't have competition. So monopolies are an extreme version of capitalism that a lot of people say don't even, consist of capitalism. All right, but let's talk about some of the ideas of it. Let's take a pencil. Let's say Mr. Pano is the only one that sells this pencil and pencils, and I have a monopoly on pencils. That's great for me. But let's talk about some of the negatives that come along if I'm the only one that sells this pencil. What could I do? The price of this pencil that is probably, 5 cents? Maybe 10 cents? What could I do with this pencil if I was the only one that sold this pencil? And I'll leave you an opportunity in the chat to answer. If I was the business owner of the pencil company, okay, I'll call it Panios Pencils. If I was the business owner of Panios Pencils, and I was the only one in the world that sold pencils, what can I do with this pencil? Think of the price. What can I do with the price of this pencil? Come on, my businessmen and women, come on. What can I, there you go. Excellent, Sydney, excellent, Mia. I can make the price of this pencil very high. Why? Because no one else is selling it. Eventually, you'll need a pencil to take a test or to whatever, and you will have to pay that price. So I can make this pencil $10 instead of 10 cents. If I'm the only one that sells it, I can make the price of the pencil whatever I want. What keeps the prices of everything down is competition. Other companies trying to sell the same product. Think logically. If I sold Panios pencils for $10 and Mia makes a pencil company and says, no, I'm not going to make it $10. I'm going to make the same quality pencil. I'm gonna make it 10 cents. Mia is going to get all of the money. If you go to a store and you look at those Arizona iced tea cans, right? Just think logically, and they cost 99 cents, and you walk to the store and they say, no, this costs $6 here. You'd be like, I'm leaving. I'm not buying this here. Because I know I could walk down to the next deli or walk down to the next gas station and get the Arizona iced tea can for $1. Okay? When the prices of something are not fair, okay, most people don't end up buying it. Okay? Another thing is, I can make the quality of this really crappy. Right? If no one's in competition with me, I don't have to worry about making a very great product of good quality because ultimately you have to buy it from me anyway. So that's what ended up happening. All right, the monopoly owners were able to make the prices of the products they sold. You'll learn about the products they sell in a little bit. They can make it extremely expensive for people to buy, and people were forced to buy it because they needed it. We're talking some of these captains of industry owned really important things, really important products that you needed to buy. Okay, what if, think logically, what if they would think about not living with a cell phone? It's kind of tough, right? Or not living without technology. Maybe some of you don't. Okay, no TV. What if there was one, phone company? They can make the price of the phone whatever they want. So instead of the iPhone costing $900, $800, they make it $9,000. And people need a phone. So you know what? They'll spend money on the product. What keeps the prices of it down is other companies like selling it. Because if you make the price of it too high, no one's going to buy it. All right, so competition keeps the people honest. But back in history, there were companies that owned a monopoly. Therefore, they made the prices whatever they want, and the quality wasn't so great as well. Okay, now we're going to do two things today. One thing today and then one thing tomorrow. What we're doing kind of tomorrow is we're going to look at some of the negatives from the captains of industry. But some of these captains of industry were somewhat okay people. Okay, even though they made a lot of money, they did a lot of good things with that money. And even though they were kind of ruthless in how they, made the prices kind of unfair, they did some good things. All right, and I'm going to end this slide with just, looking at the game Monopoly. If you've ever played the game Monopoly before, think about what the goal is. The goal is to try and own as many properties as possible. If you were to own, let's say, all of the orange properties, you own a monopoly on those properties, you could then start building hotels and houses. You could do what you want. The goal of the game is to try and, own as many properties as possible. And if you own all of the properties, you own what's called a monopoly, and then obviously you're going to win the game. Okay, so that's kind of where the name comes from, monopoly. Okay, but this is a social studies term. It's a very important term. Okay, so I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a second because I want you guys to go to the Google Classroom. I'm just gonna tell you what it kind of sounds like. Okay, if you go to the Google Classroom, you will notice I have a couple things shared. All right, the first of which is a reading, but I actually want to share with you the Google Doc. All right, so I'm gonna hit this button. You're gonna come out of it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this, but it's how it's going. All right. All right, and let's go to this. Sorry about this. All right, so we'll do the first guide together, and then you'll get the other three you get to do on your own. But you're going to use the reading on the previous pages to answer these questions, okay? So we're going to look at these captains of industry from a somewhat good perspective. Now, tomorrow we'll look at some of the bad, okay, why these people were sometimes known as captains of industry and did some good things, and then how they also did some bad things. But let's focus on the good for now. Okay, so let's have a look at Andrew Carnegie. So every person that we read about, you want to basically figure out what product or service did this guy have a monopoly on? You want to try and figure out, okay, what did they sell that they were the only ones that sold that product in the United States at the time? Now, I want to tell you in 2020 that 2021, the monopolies are illegal, but there also are very big companies still around. But back then, they were really the only ones that sold it. So we'll try and figure that out. Along with that, we want to follow what good or nice things did this person do for their community. Okay? So please go to the reading. Okay, as you notice here, there are a total of 4 of them. Okay, we're going to go through each one by one. So let's start with Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie is a Scottish-American industrialist who led the enormous expansion of the American steel industry in the late 19th century. He was also one of the most important philanthropists of his era. Philanthropist is another word for someone who gives to charity and makes things and helps the country out. Carnegie was born in Scotland and immigrated to the United States with his parents when he was 13. His first job was a factory worker in a bobbin factory. Soon after, he became a messenger boy, and he eventually progressed up the ranks of a telegraph company. So Andrew Carnegie was not a rich person when he was born. He was actually very poor. He came from Scotland. He was a true immigrant, and this guy became one of the wealthiest and richest people in American history. All right, so what did he do? In 1870s, he founded the Carnegie Steel Company in Pittsburgh, a step which cemented his name as one of the captains of industry. By the 1890s, the company was the largest and most profitable industrial enterprise in the world. It helped Pittsburgh earn the name the Steel City. Carnegie sold it in 1901 for $480 million to J.P. Morgan, who created U.S. Steel. Carnegie devoted the remainder of his life to large-scale philanthropy. Okay, so at this point, before I move on, does anyone know the product that he had a monopoly on? Was anyone able to get it? Please write it in the chat when you figure it out. What product did Andrew Carnegie own? What product did Andrew Carnegie own? Correct, Mia. He made steel. So if you wanted steel, okay, which is an extremely important product at the time, if you want a machine, if you want a house, if you want an apartment, if you want a car, you need steel to do it. Steel keeps things together and stays very strong. If you needed steel, you had to go to Andrew Carnegie. Okay, so that means any one time needed steel, they had to go to him. Carnegie sold it in 1901 for 1901. Okay, so let's look at the good he did with all of this money and all the things that he did. Okay, Carnegie devoted the remainder of his life to large-scale philanthropy with a special emphasis on local libraries, world peace, education, and scientific research. His life has often been referred to a true rags to riches story. Rags meaning he grew up with nothing, riches meaning he became extremely wealthy. With the fortune he made from business, among others, he built Carnegie Hall, which is in New York City. Some of you have maybe heard it before. Later, he turned to philanthropy and interest in education, founding the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Carnegie Institution of Washington, Carnegie Mellon University, which is a college, and the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. He is often regarded as the second richest man in history after John D. Rockefeller. Okay, so this guy made a fortune. All right, so going back to this here. So very simple. What product or service does this guy have a monopoly on? Service meaning, something that a service is something that can provide to people, but he's simple. He owns steel. So if you had he wanted steel, you had to go to him. What good or nice things did he do for his community? You want to try and find two things that each person did. So in this case, he created Carnegie Hall, which is located in New York City. That is a very famous arts center where a lot of people very famous in the arts will go and they'll put on a show. Okay, that's named after him. He created that. He also created a lot of libraries for the community. But with all of that money, he did some things that were very helpful to the community and for the country, because he created libraries. He created things that people could attend. He created a college. So with all of that money, he did do some nice and good things. Okay, so sometimes we have this notion of looking at an extremely rich person, an extremely wealthy person as a very greedy and mean individual. And in some cases that may be true, but in some cases it's not. A lot of these, captains of industry did do some good things. And I think both things could be true at once. You could be a little bit greedy. You could do some things that may be a little bit unfair, but also do some nice things for the community and people. And Andrew Carnegie is a great example of that. Three more good examples of that are Cornelius Vanderbilt, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan. You guys are going to do the same thing for the last 6 or 7 minutes here. This may be something you have to just finish up, but most of you should be able to get this done. All right, the last thing I'll say before we go, let's see. Yeah, we're going to hold off on that. Okay, so this is kind of a 2-day lesson. We're going to continue this a little bit more tomorrow. The last thing I'll say is I believe you guys are taking a math test tomorrow. So I will give you actually a pre-recorded lesson that you will have to work on for Thursday and Friday. All right, if you are an 8A1, which you are. So you'll have to do a pre-recorded lesson for tomorrow. So I just wanted to give you a heads up with that. All right, so I'm going to mute myself, but you still will have assignments Thursday and Friday. I wanted to just remind you of that. All right, let me know if you have any questions.